What we would like to do is to discuss successes and challenges that you've experienced in using healing wounds of trauma on the ground. I wonder, are there people who have only done children's trauma healing? No. Okay, so we can stay in mixed groups. If you are the only person at your table, you will have difficulty having a very good discussion. So come to another table. Yeah. And we're going to play this session a little by ear. I've left some flexi time on what we will do after the break. So if you could find your tables that you'd like to sit at. If you are really interested in children, that's your primary area, why don't you sit at this table? Margie, can you sit up here? If you're really interested in children. Is there anybody who's really their main focus and experiences in story-based? Would you like to be at one table together? Or if you do a lot of things, yeah. Anyone else? I think we can have discussion. Did somebody raise their hand on that? No. Okay. Okay, why don't you go, Mike, you want to be on a story base? Anybody else whose main experience is with story-based trauma healing? Well, we're going to talk about successes and challenges, so you're welcome to sit with that, but you might not. Okay, great. Okay, we are getting organized, yes. I want to allow you enough time. Do you want to go somewhere? Okay. I want to allow you enough time to discuss. So I'm going to give you, say, 15 minutes and check back if you need more time. The question is one of our favorite questions. Successes and challenges. What are the successes that you've experienced, like breakthroughs, like, wow, we did this, it was so fantastic? And what are the things where you were, like, we're stuck, we don't know where to go? We're going to talk in table groups. If you're all about kids, it'll be about that. If you're a mixed group, just talk. We can put them all together. We will debrief in the large group, and hopefully today we will have enough. I've allowed enough time that we can actually talk about the challenges and the successes that you list. So without further ado, unless there are questions, the question is, I don't have it on a slide. What are the successes? What are the challenges? And I'll check back with you in 15 minutes and see how you're doing. If you need more time, we can, if most of you need more time, we can move ahead. Thanks.
Harriet, do you have a question? Is it just specifically with healing groups or just in the region where you're at, whether it's advanced initials?
It's any successes and challenge in doing trauma healing on the ground in any of its manifestations in any part of the world. Is that big enough? Okay. Okay. We're going to start feeding back. Of course, we haven't exhausted the topic, but we will exhaust the time we have if we don't move ahead. So what we'll do right now is to take 2 successes from each table, going around until we feel like we've had enough. Then we'll go to the challenges. Who decides when we've had enough? I don't know. Let's have the laughing table over there. 2 successes. Oh, yeah, you'll have to come to the microphone. That's right.
Hand it to them?
Possibly.
Well, having initial and advanced trainings in Romania this year was a success. and seeing transformation even within the leaders, the ones who are trained, see transformation happen within them, even, and then also just with Ukraine and the Ukrainian Bible Society, fully on board and having an initial and getting ready to have an advanced in 2 weeks.
Great.
They're great successes.
Yeah, so actually having those things sequenced so people don't start and then flounder for years and years. Excellent. This table, this is our kids' table, but we like your successes.
Okay, well, just one that we shared. So we're using the program with about 300 rescue child soldiers and children orphaned by war in Congo on a weekly basis. And one thing we talked about is just how replicable the program is. So we have some of our kids who have graduated our program, and they're going back into their villages, recreating the model for the rescue child soldiers in the villages. And it's kind of beautiful to see that they are using their own heart wounds that have been healed, and then they're healing others. So one success is just that it's replicable and working.
Excellent. And that's Bethany Haley of Exile International. Maybe we should say our names just as a nice... I didn't ask you to say your name, so I was catching up.
James Covey from SIL. Another thing we've noticed is that, especially with some of the older children and teens, which will really fit with the teen curriculum, is that they've taken ownership and started leading it themselves, either coming back to the follow-up training as leaders or just starting to do healing groups as assistants.
Fantastic. That is so exciting. It's sort of like the missionary kid in Dallas who's running with this. I don't even know, how old is that fellow? Oh, he's not a kid. I thought he was an MK in the K sense. He's going to be an old man soon. Stacy.
Okay, one of ours is a great organizational response that we're seeing. And I think SIM, but also other alliance partners are seeing that. A second success was recently in Yetta Camp. They did some follow-up on the story-based, and were pleasantly surprised to see many people who had become Christians and a great interest in Christianity in the Bible.
Excellent. That's lovely. We heard that this morning too from some of the people sharing. That's not it was not the intention of trauma healing, but what can we do? I mean, people want to follow Jesus. Dick.
Dick Baget, SIL. At the Ukrainian workshop last June, I think a success was the Bible Society there willing to have many denominations in the same room who didn't necessarily get along with each other well.
Imagine.
And by the end of the week, they were doing well together. And to me,
That is a huge success. So, thank you. Interconfessional cooperation. I haven't been watching what you're writing, but you're doing it beautifully. Yes?
Nancy Wright-Bull with SIM. One of the successes that we saw this last year was tribal differences in tribes. We had a tribe on the Guinea side of West Africa and a tribe on the Liberia side. The trauma healing group started in Liberia, and Guinea heard what was happening and wanted to know what was going on and why were they not receiving trauma healing. So the leader went across the border and gave trauma healing, and then the groups came together. They had been at odds with each other.
Beautiful.
And they did 2 of the lessons over again, wounds of the heart and forgiveness. And they were able to reconcile with one another.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So that's a little bit tribal warfare, denominational warfare, you know, same kind of thing. That is the same theme. Mm-hmm.
Phil Monroe, just representative of this table. I think a couple of things we mentioned, but certainly there were a new equipping with Syrian Bible Society happened this year, with getting the Arabic to the table in a way was a huge undertaking, and that was good. That's right, and the storyline that goes all the way through was liked and well received.
Oh,
I think one other thing we talked about, or there's maybe more, but we noted that we're doing better at describing the differences between equipping and healing groups. We have a ways to go, but we're doing better in bringing some clarity to participants.
What's so funny is you say the same thing over and over and over, and if you say it often enough to enough people, all of a sudden the easy way of saying it emerges, and you're like, why didn't I think of that? You know, I was going back and forth. We can go, I think there is a mic on this side. You guys can have your own mic. You could share it, but you don't have to share it because they have their own. Mike, or from this table? Yeah, Stacy.
Carol Bennett from World Renew. We talked about the incredible transformational change in children's lives that people have seen, just the opening up, and how it's a lasting change, not just this one-time event and then it's over. And then the other thing that was very appreciated is just how accessible the curriculum is.
Excellent. So change, both in people turning to Christ, but also becoming well as people. Yeah.
I'm Kim Bennett. I'm from right here in the city. We run healing groups at our ministry. It's a nonprofit medical clinic and social service agency. And I would say that the biggest thing, I think, for ourselves as an organization is that it's made a difference even from the leadership as we learned the material and shared it, that the whole organization can be transformed to be operating in a more trauma-informed way. And then we can share that with other organizations. And just individually, as we've done small groups, to be able to see the care that the folks who are taking it show, where normally they might have been ignoring one another or being hostile towards one another, and yet to see them be tender when they're sharing, that's been, wow, just wonderful.
Yeah, okay, for going from hostile to tender. Would you echo that joy in the prison? Yes, we hear it for that in the prisons as well. Interesting that you go to help the women and yet it's helped your own organization. Yeah, that's beautiful. I know I'm helped by it all the time, so. Mike.
Yes, for the story-based trauma healing, this has been evolving, and it seems like different people contribute things at different times, and which is very valuable. And one that Margie introduced for a story-based trauma healing was the idea of not a group storyboard, but a personal story card. And where you draw the story, it's not for anyone else but you. And for people with traumatized memories, it really helps to, or brains, it really helps them to remember the stories. And so we would divide so a real success has been the use of the story card.
Okay. Okay. A storyboard, if you're not familiar with that, is like you draw the story using whatever visuals, you know, it's not about drawing good pictures, it's just about something that will spark your mind in the story. So they've moved it to cards. And
it's a little bit different than that in that, you know, generally a storyboard is for a whole bunch of people to look at.
oh, okay. Sometimes it's for individuals. I've seen both ways.
And this is just the way you draw it. And perhaps, Charles, you could explain what the challenge, what you saw in it.
What happened was that some of the facilitators would have like a A3 sheet and divide the sheet into segments, and so with their own particular drawing, and you know, when they see the visual, they are able to recollect the story in a very high frequency way, and they will share it. So that is also an innovation by the facilitators to share the stories with. And I think another issue came up here where sometimes you have facilitators who are not too much literate. And how do you also engage them? And for them, their drawing might not be the kind of drawing that you might want to see. They might draw something that is quite different from your perception, but it is a recollection of the story to them.
Excellent, yeah. And that is the intention of story-based trauma healing, that illiterate people like it, as Brian was sharing this morning, but it should be something that a person who does not read or does not like to read could become a very competent facilitator. So very good, very good. It accesses something else in your mind when you have the picture rather than the words, so that's excellent. Okay, I'm going to switch, did every table? Yes. I'm going to switch to challenges. We can come back to successes if we get too overwhelmed with the challenges. So, where shall we start? Let's start from the back. Do you have any, a couple challenges that you would be able to share?
Okay. Baraka Poret from Rwanda. Some of the challenges that we face is the facilitators, after reading these healing groups, we really made some overwhelming cases, and yeah, sometimes you don't know what to do with the little skills that we share, we teach them. The big challenge is now supervision. They themselves, they are overwhelmed and they feel compassion fatigue and burnout. So that's a big challenge that we face.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, some of the things that people hear are overwhelming. So caring for them, helping them. Joy.
I think one of the challenges that I face is how to actually gather a group of women that are ready to really start processing. And it's not just the people that have requested the group, but there's some other criteria that I'm beginning to see formulate. They can't have been it can't be too recent of their arrest, or they've still got this, this street addictive mentality, and they're not necessarily ready to walk emotionally into trauma. And it can't be somebody that isn't ready to, it takes a personal conversation with them to say, have you had trauma in your life? And just to kind of find out whether they're ready or not to begin to process it. So I think that's one of the challenges, is getting a group that is there and ready.
So is the challenge assessing whether they're ready or not, or finding enough people?
Finding enough people is not,
Okay,
oh my gosh.
I mean, it wasn't intended as a joke.
I hear people here saying, I've had a hard time getting a group together, and it's like, go to jail. Really, just go to jail.
If any of you get arrested, you know what to do. You don't need to waste time there. Okay.
All right, for us, several of us shared that one of the biggest struggles is contextualizing the material effectively for people so that it really is culturally relevant and appropriate. A positive of that is that in Thailand now and in Burma, they've redone the material in such a way that it is more relevant. And from our side, we've been training arts specialists to be able to go in and do arts in trauma healing. And that has actually worked very, very well. The struggle for the groups is that when they get to talking about stories that are used in the trauma healing book, for example, they have so much trauma in their own lives right now that they feel like it's just very insignificant to read this story that is in the book. And so,
Could I ask, before you continue, what stories are in the Thai? If this is in the Thai book?
Yeah.
What stories are in there?
so the ones that
Oh, from
are
Africa?
in, yeah.
Okay, that might explain
Unfortunately,
something.
originally they were, I mean, this is another problem. Originally they were translated, just borrowed from the, you probably remember this, Harriet, just borrowed from the African version.
Yeah, they intentionally said, no, we don't want to adjust them. We want the African version. But now,
Yes.
you see.
Now, it hasn't been working, so they've redone it. But, yeah, and so what they've been doing is using real life stories more. And we just did this in the Philippines with a group, and one of the big challenges was that some people, it was so close to them, the real life situation, that they started melting down. And Todd and I as therapists, we could step in and help them process it. But one of the issues that has come up now with those we've trained is, how do we do this if we don't have access to therapists? So a big, huge issue in Burma right now is they have, Pat might even know this now, they have a therapist, a Burmese therapist they would like to bring in. But I sat with her and she has so much judgment against the minority group people that I don't see any way that she could be effective in really helping them. So anyway, that's a big load.
The idea, I'm going to comment on this before we go to the next table. That gives you more time to really sharpen what you're going to say. I remember being with the Latinos in Dallas many years ago, and they were loving this, and then after a couple of days, I said, well, how is it? Oh, we love it, we love it. It's just the stories. Once we get through the stories, the rest is great. So anyway, we made some stories, Latino stories, and Thailand did not want to do that, but these stories are crafted to do certain things. And I think there are some dangers in using real life stories that you might not get the elements you need to really, bring out in the lesson. Plus what you're saying is it might be it's too personal. The stories are like, I can talk about John and Bob because it's not me. And then a little while later you can, but what was Kathleen O'Connor's talk here last year on Genesis was, she was quoting Emily Dickinson, tell it slant. Remember that? Oh, you weren't here. Tell it slant. Yeah, you can either tell your story, but a little bit at an angle, not face on to it. It can be upsetting. So good. I encourage contextualizing those stories and in episodes. And if you want to sing the whole thing, Mary, that's fine. Okay.
With the children's, one of our biggest challenges that continues and creates additional challenges is the selection of the right people to become facilitators. Because so many times people are well-meaning, they want to work with children, I love kids, and so I want to come help you with the kids. But if they come and they haven't had any experience with children, traumatized children are not the right people to start learning how to work with children. Traumatized children are often, their behavior is often very challenging, very difficult, which is another reason why we have the practicum as soon as right after we have the classroom training, because we need to see the facilitators with the children. Because we have had to weed people out. What Diane was talking about this morning with power, you really see that at play in this kind of a context, a situation where different facilitators, adults have different levels of tolerance for chaos or for power struggles or for crying or for whatever it is, the behavior of a child, and so they respond in different ways. And so you just don't know that until you actually see them with the children. And so that continues to be a challenge.
Selecting the right people. Yeah, good. And I think that's a challenge for all the varieties. You don't want to be spending a lot of time training people, taking their time, your time, when, the more you can zero in on the ones that are most likely to run with this, the better. Yeah, so thank you, Margie.
Okay. We had working with Muslims in a Muslim context, doing healing groups as a challenge. We also have getting men to attend healing groups, and we've talked about that. Ray and I've talked about the name Healing Group for Men, you know, what that feels like, and getting men to honestly express emotion in a healing group can be a challenge.
Do you have a suggestion of what would be appealing
Well,
to a
Ray
man?
calls his group a huddle, a men's ministry
Okay.
huddle, to take the healing
Excellent.
group. And my husband and I are still thinking about the military, because we really don't think Marines are going to get in a healing group, if you
Yeah.
call it a healing group. So Pat and I have talked about that too, what to call that. But yeah,
Yeah, and those kinds of things are,
you know, it's a little challenge, but still.
done that, yeah.
The other thing was getting U.S. churches to be open to trauma healing, to integrate it into their ministries. And I think we feel like once they do, they really get it and like it. But it's just getting them to open the door to it can be hard. Another thing was the story base. Margaret brought up that getting the stories checked properly after they're done. And then someone else brought up translations and how there can be misunderstandings, and that can be a challenge. And then finally, getting reports entered. So we're going to say that every year, I guess, but eventually we won't
reports in.
anymore. We will stop saying that, Harriet.
What?
I said eventually we will stop, SIM will stop making excuses and saying that we have trouble entering reports. But
Well,
it's
the
it's a challenge.
database will improve. It's underway, and it's going to be one place. Well, Dana's going to talk about it in just a little while, but there is hope. And there is also extreme pleasure on my part. I was working on the numbers I showed this morning. I actually had to work on it kind of like over the weekend, but to discover whole treasure troves of facilitators and data that was entered into the database for different countries. You know, I don't read that thing every day, so it's only when I'm wanting to think about a certain country, I go and look and like, wow. And then I had neglected to look at Liberia, so I looked at it last night, and there's a lot of stuff that's gone on there that I was not even aware of. So that's, you're doing better. You're doing much better. Yeah. Well, part of the not great is the database itself. So, well, okay. Yeah. Good. So the translation, the checking process of the stories and translation, the checking of translations and of the classic book and the story base, is that what your table was saying? And then is that the same thing as translation? Translation of the book itself. Okay, good. If you had any challenges, this is your opportunity.
In Ghana, we had challenges getting women as trainees.
Mm.
Yes.
Wow.
Because of the length of the training, and also being there the whole day was very difficult for them.
If you could send some of those Ghanaian men to the U.S., we would really like them to balance it out.
I think
Yeah.
that's a similar situation in Nigeria,
Yeah.
where the vast majority are men.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is sometimes we're finding that the written stories don't necessarily lend themselves to being told.
Yeah. In the story base.
Yes, in the
There's more
story
work
base.
to do on those.
Yeah, and so some of the stories are very long,
Mhm.
and so that's one of the challenges.
Yep. Thank you. So, okay. Thaddeus.
Okay. Two challenges from this table, speaking on their behalf. So up there. One has to do with, we focused on the children program, and we found out that if you are working with the children program, either for the training, you cannot train the facilitators without the children.
Mm-hmm.
And so getting children to be part of the training is not cheap. So the children program is needed, but compared to the classic, is very expensive. For how do you contextualize it to make it affordable so that you're able to run without less expense? And that's why, though there's a need for children program, but the expense involved in going through the children program is a bit high.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
and so that's one challenge. So looking how to do that is another area which we need to come up with.
Can I ask one, just does everybody know how the children's program works, what Thaddeus is referring to? Anybody that would like clarification on why it's expensive? Okay, yeah. You have 3-4 days with the facilitators who want to be trained as children's trauma healing facilitators. Then you have 60 children. If you have 20 facilitators, you need about 6 kids for each 2 facilitators, and the max is 20 facilitators. So you have these 60 kids go through like a camp. It could be done weekly if you were resident in the area, but if you're flying in or people are coming, you have to do it in a 5-day camp. So you have to feed them, you have to get them there or house them. You have to have balls, right? Soccer balls and various other crafty things. Thank you, Thaddeus. Permissions, yeah.
Yeah, so the other thing which came out as a challenge is how do we make either of the programs, whether classic children or the oral-based, sustainable within the local setting, so that we don't run programs with external support, which is not sustainable. And so that's now where, because the program was introduced externally, so the local facilitators expect it to be externally funded. But how do you break that circle so that they're able to see it, ways in which they can be able to integrate it into their own ministries and make it locally sustainable?
Excellent. That's really beautiful. Have we heard from your table? Challenges?
One of the challenges we talked about is just like logistical things, and I feel like people were kind of saying this too, but even like meal planning, even like where you like retreats, like just all the details that go into that can be challenging.
Yes.
Even if you just had other people to do that part of it would probably be helpful, so that you can focus on like just doing the teaching and meeting with people even one-on-one after sessions. With the agency that I work for, we work with mainly single parents, so they're either pregnant or parenting, and figuring out childcare for their little ones, and even just the interruptions that we try to do childcare on site, so that they can feel comfortable and safe that they can check on their child. But then that causes little interruptions like crying babies and diaper changes, and that can sometimes take away from the flow of the lessons. We want to be able to provide that, but it just makes it challenging sometimes.
So you're saying that providing the child care is
essential.
challenging, and then the mothers might bring their baby into or their child into the session if they're crying or something.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah. It's really helpful to have somebody who takes care of logistics, so that you can do that very thing, focus on the material and focus on training and on the people. Whether you cannot have Sarah or Vanessa, no. But it's really, what you're saying is very true, because it is a lot of work, a lot of work. Yes.
Now that you're standing there, it's easier for me to throw a challenge to you.
Okay.
And it has to do with accountability, because the trauma healing facilitator whom we are training, you are releasing them to the organizational churches so that you do not have a direct supervision over them. And so they have been entered into the database of the Trauma Healing Institute, who do not know them, except the names and the details. And so there is a disconnect in terms of how the level of accountability. It's in paper that the Trauma Healing Institute is expecting accountability from the facilitators. But these facilitators are not relating with the Trauma Healing Institute. And so the challenge is in terms of how do you make the facilitators accountable to the program model and the program materials where they don't feel an attachment to the Trauma Healing Institute, who just produced the model and the materials.
Yeah.
And that's now where we have challenges of them using the material in their own way, without following the model and without following the pattern which is expected.
Excellent question, Thaddeus. We're going to be talking about mentoring tomorrow. This is a little bit different, But I think that as this started, I'll just give my perspective. As this started, there were a few people who basically knew everybody who was doing this, and personal relations, and hit or miss, but we kind of, if I didn't know it, Margaret knew it. If Margaret didn't know it, Pat knew it, and then that was the universe. As it's grown, I am not relating to everybody. And so like for SIL, I relate to Brian. For Stacy, for SIM, I relate to Stacy. Every once in a while I'll write you, but mainly I'm talking to Stacy. So you've got to figure out some accountability system, like within that church, somebody who will take organizational responsibility for the trauma healing and, make sure that they're using the materials within the bounds of what we feel is appropriate. Does that help? Somehow, but not yet. That means no. Any other ideas? Let's stick with this question because I think it's a big one. Charles, I don't know where you're... Oh.
This issue came in a discussion with me just a few days ago with my General Secretary, and I think he was quite interested in knowing what happens on the field when we are sitting in the office and the work is going on. But one of the things that we are going to implement is that, and I even spoke to Nate about it, is that when we are able to train a number of facilitators, probably the Bible Society will go another length to give some stipend or some allowance to one of them who we would appoint as a coordinator among a group of facilitators, because we must be aware of what is going on. We don't want to be sitting down and getting reports which we are not too sure about. So I think one of the ways which we are going to address is that we would appoint a number of facilitators within a particular locality, one to be a leader over them, and then we might be engaging them in the discussion and monitoring to find out how the program is going. So it's one way to ensure accountability.
Yeah, thank you, Charles. And let's get some other feedback to that idea, to find someone who has demonstrated a passion for this, they've been called to this, and offer them a stipend knowing that this is going to be beyond what an ordinary person could volunteer. They wouldn't have that much discretionary time. So this would be somebody putting in more hours on it. I know that's been used in different places. Anybody have experience or views on that?
Harriet, I don't have a view on the stipend, but I will say this, as an organization, we committed to seek endorsements for the SIM personnel that we certify as facilitators. So if you are an SIM personnel, I'm going to seek an endorsement from your sending office and also the sending country office with SIM that you serve in. And that is private between me and them, and I send them a list of competencies that we expect, and I ask them, would they endorse you as a trauma healing facilitator in that country, knowing that you're representing not only SIM, but also the Trauma Healing Institute, and you'll be working with the local churches. And if I get back something that's not an endorsement, then you become inactive in the system. And that's for all of our SIM personnel. Now, we train people who are not with SIM, and like Thaddeus is saying, if you train people in the local churches or other organizations, then we lose control of that. But then we have to depend on other organizations and churches to have some type of integrity system in place.
Yeah, I wish Erle was here. In Suriname as well, they're really, really focusing on working through the churches, because just individuals, random individuals, it's hard to address this problem that you're talking about, Thaddeus. But if the church takes ownership, and I've had to do this with organizations where they had random missionaries doing trauma healing and saying, listen, you're doing this, but you need somebody who's providing leadership and accountability for your people. And I don't know how to do that, but churches have ways of organizing themselves. And I think that one of the issues that we're looking at here is Thaddeus's question goes against Charles' suggestion, because if you do have to give a stipend, how many stipends can you give and for how long? So how do you do that and continue with a sustainable, reproducible model? That's intention, isn't it? And yet, if all you fund is equipping sessions and publications, and nobody has the time to give to it, if you have a garden, it takes a lot of work. Somebody's got to be out there weeding, feeding, watering. So these are tensions. Who has the perfect solution, or at least an idea? Anybody want to speak to this? Mary. Mary's going to speak, and then we'll have...
World Renew has the advantage that we do have an office with paid staff people. And what we have had our office staff people get equipped as facilitators, and they understand the program. So we have paid staff who are doing follow-up, calling people, please give me your report, have you done a healing group, et cetera, and getting things into the database. So I'm sure not everybody has that, but because we do other programs, trauma healing's not the only thing we do, and so our staff who are also working on our other programs commit a portion of their time to follow up on the trauma healing.
Excellent, thank you, Mary. So we're getting some different answers. And Matthew.
I'd like to, so Matthew Williams, Exile International. Similar to, is it World Renew, Mary? Okay, similar to World Renew, we have offices in Congo and Uganda with other programs going as well. So not necessarily, I would say we discovered this with another program. We use another curriculum trauma healing program called the Empower program, is that we would open up the trainings to non-staff members so that church leaders could be trained, so that other volunteers in the communities could be trained. And so that ripple could continue, we did have some who would take it and they would run with it. And they were doing a great job. They were actually beginning to even submit reports as lay or as volunteers. Yet to keep that ripple going, for us it was about how do we make sure we don't lose that? So then started providing that motivation, started providing that stipend, if you will, though it's not quite the same as a full-time staff member, but now they have motivation and freedom in their lives because they're going to have to take care of their families too. So we don't have very many of those, but it does help us keep the ripple going.
I think there's a couple things in what you're saying is very important. You first see who's really running with it and doing it, because I don't know if you have, but many of us have been in sessions where we think, oh, this person's going to be great. And they don't even come back for the advanced session. You know, it's very hard to predict who is going to run with it. So I am very hesitant to hire people too soon. Just wait, let them do something voluntarily, and actually some of our staff that ABS has hired has gone down that route. So you see who's got it and go with that. Yeah, but I think these churches. The leadership of those churches have got to say, our church needs to do this. We need to take responsibility for this. And then you work with whoever it is they appoint. Because you can't just be doing random individuals. You've got to have some sort of structure to it. Are there any other, Dick, are you grabbing the microphone? Okay.
Yeah, the question of sustainability is a critical one. And I think, probably we may have some pieces of this, but really get it organized is what does sustainability look like and what's required? I mean, I think the question is supervision of following up with people. And I think you need a local structure that's going to pick that up like the church. But then help them understand, well, what are the pieces there that made for your particular situation, what that's going to look like. Because I think we can come in and get a program going, but people have no idea what it really takes to make it sustainable.
Thank you, yeah. And every situation is different, so there isn't like we have the answer, now go do this, because there's both the cultural differences, the national, the national differences, and then there's all the personal dynamics between the pastors and the whats that you have no idea of. Okay, please.
So this is just a random idea of maybe the way the structure currently is. So you have facilitators and then you have training facilitators. And I'm wondering if part of the responsibility for a training facilitator would be to follow up with people that they train. And I realize that can get tricky if they're training lots and lots of people. And so then maybe the tree would have to go down further and they could appoint like a supervising facilitator over a group of like 10 or something like that.
Excellent idea, yeah. Tomorrow Dana will be talking for about 40 minutes or so, I think, about ideas for mentoring. Mary will be talking tomorrow for the second session after coffee break on, what is the title, Power and Money? No, Power and Money and Sustainability in these kinds of things. So we'll be touching more on this. I want to ask right now, whoa, Brian.
Yeah, I just wondered, did the lack of people coming for the advanced come up? Because I've seen a lot of people that come for the initial, and it's not completely unrelated to the question we've been talking about here. If people will come to the advanced, there can be a better way of screening, for one thing, but everyone who comes to the advanced always says how enriching it is and how much more confident they are. Has anyone done things that are encourage more people to come back for the advanced? I think there's a big lag of people who don't come back for the advanced.
Yes, definitely, definitely. What I want to do is ask, I'll try to get these so you can see all of them, but is there any other challenge that you really want to add to the list that isn't already been mentioned? And then after that we want to make sure we got what's on your mind. And then we can decide which ones we want to talk about more. So, people not return. Oh, are there any other ones? Yeah, Debbie.
Yeah, one thing I'm continuing to hear is just the time required for trainings and people's work schedules. We've tried to come up with all different kinds of models of, well, okay, how could you do this in 3 days, or, so time.
Is that in the U.S. or also
everywhere? I'm hearing that. I'm hearing it in Africa. I heard it in Suriname and Guyana. I know it's an issue here. How can we make this accessible to people who want the training? So it's, everything.
Yeah, kids is actually more challenging. So, any other ones, Renee?
I don't know if I know how to articulate this well, but kind of like the delicate dance between being like foreigners coming in and bringing in a program and working with the nationals and the turning it over and they're working together, and just the delicate cultural aspects that can be a steep learning curve, and just how to do that well and how to know when it's time to pull back and they're ready to flourish and fly. And I don't think it's just unique for some situations, but
yeah. So even
power dynamics,
even like Charles or Thaddeus, you have that question. You are the nationals, but you've got to put up with us coming. We have to figure out how to like each other and work together. Okay. Another.
This is not a challenge. It's more in addressing the whole issue of how do we manage this and get people to come back for advance.
Mm-hmm.
And what I think would really be helpful, and I don't know if we're doing a good job of this or not, is really when a person decides they want initial training. They've tasted this and they say, yes, this is for me. Do we really take the time to explain the options, the commitment, the path that you could go on with trauma healing?
Yeah.
And so that they fully understand, so they can kind of get a vision of really what they want to do with it first before they just jump.
Yeah, and that's a funny, there's also some issues there, because often people, Thaddeus was saying, I came to a convening session, I didn't even know what a convening session was, but I went, and then I found out, and you have people coming to an equipping session, I don't know how many times I've heard this, I really didn't know what this was about, or I thought I was coming to help somebody else, but now, after I've gone through it, now I'm really, I've got the bug, I need to do this. So we want to have people be aware and understand, and yet at the same time, we know this other dynamic goes on. So I'm not going to be just totally evasive to every issue, but all of the issues are complex. Okay. You can.
I would just add not just the time required for the trainings, but the physical exertion of the trainings, where you're starting at 7 a.m. and you're not done until 9 p.m. And I know that many people, myself chief among them, I can't sustain 14-hour days during the trainings. So I know that's an issue that I've heard from many, many trainers and the trainees too, is just the exhaustion level in the trainings. So I'm going to add that to the list.
Okay. Are we happy? Oh, Thaddeus.
The other issue is the word practicum, because we have the initial equipping session, then the advanced, then silently there is the aspect of practicum. Now, our experience in our Kenyan context, which is African context, is that we don't give those who have trained the initial a structured way of going to do the practicum. So we tell them, for you to come for the advanced equipping session, you need to go and facilitate at least 2 healing groups. Now they look at you in terms of, how do I do it? And so we realized they had a challenge of healing groups, so we had to come up with a way to help out, whereby now those who are master facilitators or training facilitators are to come alongside and intentionally create healing groups and invite those who have gone through initial to come, and if they are practicum, but at the same time, they're being helped to do it, because some of them will struggle even beginning an healing group.
So you actually have them go lead one with a more experienced facilitator.
Yes, and that's one challenge which we had, because after 5 days, people are processing their own trauma. So in the first 3 days, they are dealing with their own trauma, and then with the few logistic lessons you are covering, the 4th day, and the 5th day is assessment. So you realize that you are releasing people into the practicum who are not well prepared to do healing groups. And that's where we realize there's a challenge. You are throwing people to do healing groups which they were not prepared for. And that's where we had to come in and contextualize on how to help them during the practicum.
Excellent. Thank you. One more, and then we're going to do something else.
One of the things that we did with a group that wanted to be trained was, because they had no clue what trauma healing really was, we had them go, we did a trauma healing group with them before we trained them to be leaders.
Yes.
And we found that to be really, really helpful, because then, when we went into the training, they understood the lessons and they could see how it applied.
Yes, and I think it just went out, but I think she suggested that, Kathy, you tried to suggested that in Iraq?
Well, yeah, what we did was...
Oh, you have to have the microphone. Oh, sorry. It's coming.
In one location in the Middle East, working with local churches and partners, we asked them to help us invite people who might be interested, like a convening session, to come. And then we did this one day, and then we had the advanced participants who had done their healing groups and then had their training actually present the lessons.
And that, although, they didn't do everything perfectly, that turned out to be a great success, and we got so much positive response from the local churches. And then the participants themselves felt really pretty good about being able to connect with local church leaders, and it provided opportunities for them later on.
Yeah, and you never know, I always feel like I do it very well, and they might not be as trained, but the fact that they are from there, they speak the language, they know the culture, they know they might be doing better than we do. They might have a better angle on some parts of it. But yeah, so the mentoring was watching them do this. That was very good. So in just a minute, we're going to have some group discussion again, small group discussion again. But the healing group and the equipping session. When you are starting in a country and you have to fly there or you've got to do an equipping session usually, or I guess you could do a healing group somehow. Let's say what we usually do. We usually do an equipping session because then those facilitators could use a model like what you were suggesting of doing first healing groups. Or if you're in the locality, you can start with a healing group. Were your healing groups weekly or like a retreat? Okay, so you have to be resident to pull that off. You can't fly in and do that. So you have to have some force on the ground, then you can consider that model. And I think it has a lot of advantages. What I'd like you to do now is we have these challenges that are on the papers. You can read them and have your table pick out the one that you really want to discuss, one of them that you feel the most enthusiastic about. Some of them might be a little bit the same thing. So people not returning for advanced trainings, what are your suggestions? Where are you going with that? Okay. Okay. I'm going to read these challenges while she does that. Overwhelming cases in healing groups. The facilitators are overwhelmed by how much trauma they're hearing about. He's taller. As we're doing this, be thinking of the one that grabs you. So be thinking of the one that grabs you. We're going to run out of time otherwise, but just take one that grabs you, talk about it. We'll just have 5 minutes at your table to talk about one. If you finish talking about it, the next, and then we'll hear back from you about it, okay? Yeah. Just take about 5 minutes. Yeah, try to think of a solution that you would like to.
It's Gracie. Yeah, that's
I hear what you're saying, but
We just have a couple minutes. I would like to ask each table Each table, if you could write down, you know, a little bit about what your outcomes of your discussion, what is, the outcome is, and give that to me, and I'll look at it and see what we want to feed back to you, but that will then be your release to go have tea break. Just write it on a paper and give it to me. I just need kind of the outcomes.